Legal U.S. resident Kilmar Abrego Garcia remains behind bars in El Salvador's Supermax prison, despite the Trump administration admitting he was arrested and deported in error, and despite a federal court order reinforced by a Supreme Court ruling that the administration must return him to the U.S. On Wednesday, Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen traveled to El Salvador to see Abrego Garcia and ask Salvadoran President Nayib Bukele to let him go. But Salvadoran officials refused. Van Hollen says Abrego Garcia's family fears for his safety.
I don't know about his health status. That's exactly why I wanted to meet with him directly. That's why I wanted to talk to him on the phone. That's why I want to arrange a phone call with his wife.
Van Hollen said he'd continue to work for Abrego Garcia's release.
I can assure the president, the vice president, that I may be the first United States senator to visit El Salvador on this issue, but there will be more.
The White House blasted Van Hollen.
It's appalling and sad that Senator Van Hollen and the Democrats applauding his trip to El Salvador today are incapable of having any shred of common sense or empathy for their own constituents and our citizens.
But a U.S. district court says the administration is showing deliberate disregard by not halting deportation flights to El Salvador, saying there is probable cause to find Trump officials in criminal contempt for violating his orders. The administration has a week to respond. Trump's Attorney General, Pam Bondi, said point blank Abrego Garcia would not return, no matter what the Supreme Court rules.
He is not coming back to our country. President Bukele said he was not sending him back. That's the end of the story.
But it's not. This case with Abrego Garcia and others has become the center of a constitutional crisis between the Trump White House and the federal courts, two supposedly co-equal branches of government. The final chapter of who may prevail in that constitutional struggle has yet to be written. Rob Reynolds, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Well, let's bring in Leon Fresco. He's an immigration lawyer. He's also a former Deputy Assistant Attorney General in charge of immigration at the U.S. Department of Justice. He joins us now from Washington, D.C. So, Leon, there are two things going on here. There's Garcia's case and then judges looking into that. But meanwhile, I see Judge James Boasberg, who's a federal judge, says he's going to begin contempt proceedings against the administration for the deportation flights generally. And this is, I understand, criminal contempt, so not just civil contempt. How serious is this for the administration and the officials involved here?
This is a very serious situation right now because there's two different problems at play. First, the judge said that he wants to figure out the specific names of the people involved in disregarding his oral order not to deport people to El Salvador. And then when he figures out those names, he's going to hold them in criminal contempt. And then he said, if the Department of Justice won't prosecute those people, he may exercise his authority to use a very rare procedure where he can appoint a prosecutor himself to actually prosecute the case. Now, this could lead to a major constitutional crisis within the framework of if the administration isn't cooperating with the court decisions. But then the other thing that the court has in play is for the people it's holding in criminal contempt, the attorneys involved in that situation actually are in a situation where they could also face sanctions with their law license. And so that will also make it difficult for those individuals to continue practicing law. And so that's another disincentive for failing to cooperate with the courts.
Well, you're saying if the White House doesn't agree to cooperate, the White House is saying they're going to appeal. So what happens now?
Well, they're permitted to appeal, certainly, and that's their right. And there's going to be a very interesting question about whether the court, which had lost jurisdiction over the actual deportation case, continues to have jurisdiction over the contempt case, because the Supreme Court did say that the original case about deportations that Judge Boasberg was handling needed to be moved to the Southern District of Texas, where the individuals actually boarded those flights. And so from that perspective, the Supreme Court may just say, look, we want to cancel this chapter and move on. But if Judge Boasberg is permitted to allow to be allowed to have jurisdiction. He has certainly laid out his plan, and the administration has certainly laid out their plan. And this leads to a loggerheads because neither side is saying that they're willing to give in here.
So in the meantime, though, what does this actually mean for the policy of the deportation flights? Could at some point the administration actually be forced to halt them?
Well, the only way that the administration is going to be forced to halt the deportations is if they try again to bring people to El Salvador. So that's the first thing, because the people already in El Salvador are there. And so that's going to be a different question about whether those people get sent back. But in terms of if they try to send more people to El Salvador, do challenges get made? Are those challenges in the variety of what's known as a class action, which means that they cover everybody in that situation? And then ultimately, it does not appear like the administration will follow any decision from a court unless it comes from the Supreme Court. And then that's going to be the ultimate test. If the Supreme Court says that the deportations cannot continue to El Salvador, maybe it's because they say that the conditions in El Salvador are so bad that they violate the conventions against torture. Let's say that that's the reason. Then it's going to be up to the Trump administration to make the existential decision for the United States. Does it comply with the order, or does it simply not comply with the order? And that's what everybody's waiting to see.
Well, Judge Boasberg isn't the only judge pushing back on these deportations. There's another judge investigating whether the White House has violated a Supreme Court ruling on returning Kilmar Abrego Garcia, as we were just hearing about. So his case in itself could become a real litmus test for the administration.
Absolutely. There in Maryland, Judge Sinas is moving very, very carefully and is just, again, trying to do discovery, trying to figure out who ordered what, when, where, and then the same thing, trying to build a very, very robust record of specific decisions that were made so that if she's going to make a decision, you must bring these people back because they're theoretically still in the custody of the United States, because the United States is the one paying for the confinement and is the one directing El Salvador to even take people from the United States. Then that's going to be a decision that the judge makes. The judge may also choose to back it up with contempt. And this series of cases may also come up to the Supreme Court as well.
Well, we'll certainly continue watching all of these proceedings very closely indeed. Leon Fresco there, an immigration lawyer who was formerly at the United States Department of Justice. Thank you so much for joining us, Leon.
Thank you.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.